Greetings, fellow captains, and welcome back. I'm not gonna lie, this was genuinely, this is genuinely going to be quite a difficult video for me to articulate correctly. But as probably everyone is fully aware, that His Royal Highness Prince Philip has passed away, and despite being the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of the United Kingdom, which obviously I am part of, a lot of people may or may not realise or be aware of the fact that the Duke of Edinburgh, or Philip Mountbatten, was in fact an active participant in the British Royal Navy, and he did actually serve and put his life at risk during World War II. Now, obviously, we all know I quite like my history when it comes to battleships, World of Warships, particularly the British history, and I've actually met Prince Philip twice, whilst receiving my silver and gold Duke of Edinburgh awards whilst I was a young child. And yeah, I say young child, I was 14 and 16, receiving them both. But you know, he's the kind of gentleman that will certainly leave a lasting impression on a person. So I don't think I'm going to do this justice at all, but I'm going to try. A brief history into Prince Philip's naval service with the Royal Navy. So the Duke of Edinburgh joined the Royal Navy in 1939. He was admitted through his uncle, Lord Mountbatten, and played a part in his choice. With Philip was also considering entering the Royal Air Force. If he was left to his own devices, he probably would have signed up for the Navy regardless. But his uncle also persuaded him that it was definitely the more sensible option. He was noted in an interview in 1995 to have said, "If I'd joined the Royal Air Force, I wouldn't be here now." The Duke added, suggesting that he may not have survived the war had he have joined the RAF. So when he took his entrance exam, Prince Philip passed as 16th out of 34 of the candidates for officer training, whereas on the interview portion he actually had an outstanding score of 380 out of a potential 400 marks, graduating as the best cadet from his class in the Dartmoor Royal Naval College. Philip was appointed a midshipman in January 1940, and he spent 2 months on the battleship HMS Ramillies before spending a brief portion of time on both HMS Kent and Shropshire. He's also quoted of saying, "We lived in fairly Spartan conditions aboard the Ramillies. There was no air conditioning. We had a bathroom. There was no air conditioning, and we had a bathroom that was just space where we kept sea chests with our kit in. So obviously it was also very hot down there. We didn't sleep well. We had camp beds on the upper deck." He asked if he was treated as one of the boys, and he said that he was, and he was used to the curious people. The captain of the Ramillies was a fellow called Bailey Groman, and he was made to be what is called a doggy, which is a midshipman's assistant. Bailey Groman done this because he had in fact been the midshipman assistant, or doggy, by Prince Philip's grandfather. Lord Lewis, First Sea Lord and Chief of the Defence Staff, questioned years later why Philip had been moved so early from Ramillies, and the reply was that they were trying to keep him away from the war, He was quoted as saying by the Duke of that this was quoted, a quote from Tim Herald, the biographer of the Duke of Edinburgh. When asked whether it bothered him being kept away from the heavy action, the Duke said, "It didn't bother me, as the Prince from a neutral country," with him obviously being Greece, very much because the ship I was sailing in were out there anyway, so they didn't really keep him out of the war at all. I was moved out of Ramillies when she went to the Mediterranean, and I was moved to HMS Kent when she went to the Mediterranean, and then went to HMS Shropshire. When the Italians invaded Greece, they lifted the ban on him serving, and he went on to join HMS Valiant. Following Italy's invasion of Greece in October 1940, the battleship Valiant was equipped with radar, anti-aircraft guns, and joined the Mediterranean campaign in 1941. It was here he was involved in the Battle of Crete, and mentioned in dispatches for his role in the Battle of Cape Matapan as well. Lord Lewis served for a time with Prince Philip on the Valiant, and remembered in Tim Herald's a portrait of Prince Philip that having a role was unusual, and he was also transferred to the ship on his own. After wrongly assuming Philip would be favoured due to his royal status, Lord Lewis remembered he could more than hold his own. He gave as good as he got, and had no airs or graces. Philip remembered the Valiant had been through a major refit since just before the Second World War, having been used during World War One, with turrets acting as anti-aircraft towers as well. Within 2 or 3 days of joining, we went out and there was a great bombardment. The Italian-held port of Bardessa in North Africa recalls. A lot of 15-inch gunfire, of which I had heard before, but it had made even a big ship like the Valiant rock around a bit. The Italian had an affinity to shoot back. It was quite interesting to hear things whistling over and landing in the water with a great splash beside you. You suddenly realise that life was real. Very soon after that, we were taking a convoy to Malta, and there was a tremendous attack on the whole fleet by German dive bombers. There was so much going on. It wasn't quite a question of fright. It was just amazement that anything like this could happen. The Duke of Edinburgh recalls an experience on the Valiant where the whole ship bent after a series of bombs had hit the vessel. During the Battle of Cape Matapan in March of 1941, the Valiant was among the battleships being led by none other than Sir Andrew Cunningham, a name that all of you should be familiar with. He was the commander of the British Mediterranean Fleet, and was sailing towards a group of Italian cruisers and destroyers after receiving intelligence that the British convoys would be attacked. Philip's role was to operate the searchlight and to find the enemy targets whilst in considerable darkness. One of the Italian vessels was damaged and had stopped, and the other 2 cruisers came back to assist her during the night. Unfortunately for them, they were detected by Prince Philip's floodlights, through Prince Philip's spotlight. We ploughed on to where we thought these cruisers were going to be. The Valiant actually had a rather rudimentary radar and picked up these as echoes, which were stationary, and that's what we assumed they were. I got an indication of what directions to point the searchlights, and they said, well, illuminate. So I switched the thing by, and suppose sheer good luck or chance, I found a cruiser. It picked up that we were close, and it can't have been more than 2,000 yards away. The beam wasn't big enough to cover the whole cruiser, he said. Somebody said train light or something, because there was another cruiser, and that's when everybody started shouting, They didn't really need much illumination after that. This battle, it actually took the Ramilleys an entire 5 minutes to sink sink the two cruisers. After that, Prince Philip headed back to Portsmouth to take the sub-lieutenant exam. The 5-part test consisted of sections of gunnery, torpedo, navigation, signals and seamanship, which marks a ranging of 1 to 3, highest to lowest, 1 being the highest, 3 to the lowest in each. Prince Philip scored highly, achieving a 4-1, with just one of his subjects being graded as a 2. He was subsequently promoted to sub-lieutenant and posted to HMS Wallace off the east coast of the UK before becoming lieutenant, and then a few months later the youngest first lieutenant in the Navy in 1942, taking post at the age of just 21 years old. First Lieutenant Philip was acting as second in command of his ship, and recalling his time upon joining the Wallace, the Duke of Edinburgh said, "The North Sea was a very active place. At night there were usually alarms about e-boat attacks, so we had to rush around and fire star shells. I don't think we ever had a serious encounter with the e-boats." The following July, he saved the Wallace from an attack by night bombers in Sicily, launching a smoke raft to distract the bombers and allowing the ship to escape without being noticed. In 1944, Philip was also posted on HMS Whelp, the then brand new destroyer, which was heading for the Pacific for actions against the Japanese. While these ships were being constructed, the Duke lived in a hotel in Newcastle, which was part of the administrative process before Whelp had been commissioned. "If you're in the service, you meet people from all walks of life," he said, and when asked if time gave him an insight into the man in the street, "You just live with them. The only difference is difference in people having different. The only difference in people is having different responsibilities. You get to know people of every kind of background." When he was on Whelp, when the Japanese surrender was signed in 1945, they were actually escorting USS Missouri into Tokyo Bay. The Japanese surrender was signed aboard the American ship, which Prince Philip saw take place from his own eyes, standing on the deck of HMS Whelp. "You could see what was going on with a pair of binoculars," he said in 1995 in his interview, describing the end of the war as a great relief. Then they beat retreat, which you could hear going on, he continued. "From there we went on to Hong Kong. For the most extraordinary sensation when we sailed, we suddenly realised that we didn't have to darken the ship anymore. We actually stopped in the South China Sea and pipped hands to bathe." Prince Philip later remarked that the Whelp was perhaps his favourite ship he had served on during the war. After the Second World War had ended, Philip was posted to Porthlelly in North Wales. Yes, that is 100% the correct pronunciation. And on HMS Royal Arthur in Wiltshire, becoming an instructor there. Lord Charteris, who also served in the Second World War, praised Philip for his contribution during the conflict, saying he was a very gallant officer. Philip himself was modest, stating in 1948 that upon receiving the freedom of the city of London, that we did what we were told to do it to the very best of our ability, and to keep on doing it. From early 1947 until his marriage to then Princess Elizabeth in November of the same year, he was known as Lieutenant Philip Matapan, having abandoned his Greek and Danish royal titles He had then taken the surname Mountbatten from his mother's family and became an official British citizen. King George had made him the Duke of Edinburgh on the morning of his wedding to Elizabeth. On the 20th of November the same year, the couple married at Westminster Abbey, although in post-war Britain, Philip's German relations were kept away from the wedding. Following his marriage, the now Duke of Edinburgh returned to the Royal Navy, moving with his wife to Malta in 1949, and then the year after, Prince Charles was born. He was then appointed First Lieutenant of HMS Chequers, the vessel that would lead the first destroyer flotilla. In July 1950, Philip was then promoted to Lieutenant Commander and given his first command of the frigate HMS Magpie. According to Tim Herald, his time in charge of the frigate was a mixture of naval routines and ceremonial visits. Philip ended his active naval career in July 1951 when King George's health began to decline. Queen Elizabeth II took the throne in the following February, and the Duke of Edinburgh was promoted to the rank of Commander of the Royal Navy in 1952. Then in 1953 he was given the honorary 5-star appointment in all 3 services, being made Admiral of the Fleet, British Army Field Marshal and Royal Air Force Marshal. In 2011 he was then further promoted to Lord High Admiral of the Royal Navy, succeeding the Queen in their role. So yeah, that was I'm gonna understand that there's Prince Philip has said some controversial things in his lifetime, and although I probably agree that some of the things he said he shouldn't have, I'd rather keep them out of the comments at the moment, because this is to celebrate the life of a seaman, of a sailor who actually risked his life for the freedom of Europe. And I hope you enjoyed this little insight into the history of Prince Philip and his naval career. And until next time, take care.
Shut up!